Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All in Crypto podcast. I am your host, Rupert, and today I am delighted to be joined by a much asked for guest. Of course, we have Staci Warden on the show, the CEO of the Algorand Foundation. Staci, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm delighted to be here. I'm very excited. This podcast has been a little bit problematic for me because my CTO has been on 4 or 5 times, John Woods, and our CMO, Mark, has also been on. And so they're like, oh, we've been invited to All in Crypto a couple of different times now. How about you, Staci? Have you been invited? I'm like, oh, no, no. Oh, and then Mark says, oh, really? I've been invited too. So they're casting some shade on me for not having been on now. So now I'm very happy to join their ranks.
Do you know the phrase saving the best for last
Yeah,
comes to mind?
that's what I'm gonna.
Just don't tell John or Mark that I said that.
I'm
But no,
totally going to say that. I'm totally going to use that.
of course, we're over the moon to have you on. I think every Algorand video that I put out there, somebody asks to get you on. So we're over the moon that we can finally do this. And I'm really looking forward to sort of getting into Algorand, a little bit about yourself. And I think the best place for us to start is with yourself. You've got a remarkable career across finance, development, and technology, from the likes of JP Morgan to the Milken Institute. How did you actually end up at the Algorand Foundation? We tend to see a lot of people from perhaps the financial sector, certainly the technology sector, transition to the distributed ledger sector. But how did you end up here? I think that's a fascinating story to get into.
Yeah, as you said, I think, had a job in almost every aspect of finance. I ran the small cap market for the Nasdaq. I looked after governments for JP Morgan. I was at the U.S. Treasury Department, work in the debt office.
Wow.
So I've been at two different think tanks, and so I think I've got a pretty well-rounded view of how financial sector, works. And I was at the Milken Institute, and crypto was kind of a side hustle for me there. And after 8 years with Mike Milken, I decided that crypto was getting just bigger and bigger and bigger. And I decided that I needed to do it full time. It was kind of like a, blah, blah, or get off the pot moment for me, right? A little bit. So you're either in or you're not in. And so I decided to leave the Milken Institute, and I stayed with them on a part-time basis and was exploring opportunities in crypto. And I had a couple of clients, and I was already on the board of the Global Blockchain Business Council. And I was headhunted to be on the board of the Algorand Foundation. And I was not very aware of Algorand, actually. I'd heard about it, but I wasn't super knowledgeable of it. And so when I started doing research on it, I thought, I had that same feeling that I had when I first learned about Bitcoin. This one really could be the one. This really could be the solution to. I'm sure we'll talk about these things, to the things that I was hoping from crypto. And so I joined the board. When you join a board, you're giving your name and your reputation to the organization. So I did do a lot of due diligence on Algorand before I joined. And then I was on the board for a few months, and they decided to make a change with the executive management team, and they made me the CEO.
Wow, fantastic. And with your transition from, you came from the sort of Milken Institute and obviously the traditional financial space, when you looked at sort of Algorand, or you looked at the crypto space and were kind of attracted to it, did you see it being the kind of, what was the thought there? Was it, you thought this was going to be the evolution of what you were already doing in the traditional financial sector or the technology sector? What sort of really attracted you to, getting off the pot, so to speak, and getting involved with this industry? What was the kind of thought there?
So I have always believed a couple of things. And, most fundamentally, I think that the private sector needs to drive growth. And so that means that, and a well-functioning financial sector is key to that. So for me, for a country or a community to develop, it has to be private sector led, and finance is a really important underpinning of that. And so the formula that I kind of believe in there is that if people have access to other outlets for their savings than just bank accounts, and they can invest in companies, well, then those companies can take that savings, they can hire people, they can grow, they can have profits, and that will generate more household savings, and more household savings will then invest in companies, and you can get this virtuous circle going. But the more I actually worked in finance, and I worked in many developing countries as part of JP Morgan, actually, working with them on how to strengthen their capital markets, how to strengthen their payment systems, it became increasingly clear to me that there were these very interesting problems and bottlenecks in traditional finance. In some African countries, for example, you have to have a letter from another bank customer before you can open a bank account. I mean, stuff like that. And so I care very much about financial inclusion and access to capital. So when I first learned about Bitcoin, I thought, this is it. This is the answer. I mean, this is, payments can be made right away. The fees aren't going to be so, I bought into this idea of digitally small payments being made on Bitcoin. I didn't think of it initially so much as a store of wealth, but I thought of it as a good alternative. And the worse the government, the worse the central banking authorities, the better Bitcoin would be. And so I started very much in a Bitcoin mentality, the way that I think many of us did. And then as that evolved, and I came to realize that Bitcoin is a very interesting store of value, but it's not performant enough to serve all of these other kinds of use cases that I thought were very important. And then, of course, Vitalik came along and Ethereum came along, and then I started thinking that started opening my eyes to all of the. And then, then I was like hooked, basically.
It's kind of like entering the matrix, isn't it? You've taken the right pill and now you're kind of, everything's starting to make sense with what this technology is actually capable of. Certainly smart contracts were a big one
Right.
for me. Algorand, I think, really makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. When we look at Bitcoin and what its promise was in regards to being a peer-to-peer cash, I'm not convinced that that is ever going to be the case unless, in fact, it ended up on, being tokenized on blockchains. And then there's a whole argument about that. But something
Right.
like Algorand really brought performance to the table and actually added a
Yeah.
whole load of capabilities to what this industry spawned out of. And certainly when people talk about decentralization, I know at the moment, Algorand's currently going through some changes in regards to staking, how that's going to be
Yeah.
done. Maybe you could talk
Yeah.
a little bit on that. I know I touched on it with John a little bit, but what's your kind of take on the undergoing changes that Algorand's going through as it relates to staking and really furthering decentralization and empowering people?
So I really do believe in this technology more broadly, and of course I believe predominantly in Algorand. But I think to not lose that broader idea of crypto as a solution to some of these real problems that we have in traditional finance, and we can talk more about exactly where I think crypto can make inroads and work cooperatively with traditional finance. But for Algorand in particular, it's a very performant chain, right? So one of the most important things about it is that transactions are instantly final. So there is this no kind of fork competition, soft fork kind of thing that happens over a period of, several minutes on these other chains, or even like a couple of seconds is going to be too long. So we do have this idea that when you make a transaction, it's final. This has, as you can imagine, really important consequences for financial sector applications. In addition to that, it can compete with Visa in that it can do 10,000 transactions per second, and Visa kind of clocks in at around 7,000 transactions per second. So we know that we can handle the throughput of success. And I personally am a little bit tired of like pilots everywhere. Like if you can't build this thing for scale from the beginning, then you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. So we think we're pretty geared to the scale. Success is not going to be our demise. We can handle all of the scale that we can bring. And so, and as you said, I mean, I do feel like you tempt the gods a little bit every time you say this. So I don't love saying this, but we've not been down for a second, as you said earlier. So we I think we have the goods to deliver, and because this chain is very performant and it is very lightweight. Like for example, you used to be able to run a participation node just on a Raspberry Pi. Now it has gotten a bit faster, and the requirements are a bit heavier. So you need to be running a high-end laptop. But the initial ethos of this was very much in the idea of permissionless finance, permissionless participation, and that if you were going to participate in the ecosystem of Algorand, then as a good citizen in that ecosystem, you should run a node and you should stake algos and uphold the security, do your part to uphold the security of the network. Like that's your job well, Rupert, as it turns out, people respond to monetary incentives. I don't know if you ever noticed this in your in your crypto life,
Absolutely.
but there is this sense in which people like to be rewarded for doing things. And so we were last to this, I think, idea that people need to be incentivized monetarily to do their part to uphold the security of the network. But we have some advantages now in that you can do this in a very lightweight way. The minimum balance is not very high. It's 30,000 algos. And if you don't have 30,000 algos, you can participate in a pooled solution. You won't be slashed if something happens. So you can, you're not locking up your algos. You can withdraw them at any moment and use them for something else if you want. You won't, of course, be counted and be eligible to receive those rewards if for those algos that you pull out, obviously. But we tried to keep this kind of freedom, decentralized ethos in actually the way we stake. And so we go live this month. So I don't want to put an exact date down because the very smart engineers over at Algorand Technologies are delivering this. We're just, helping with the community element of it and the tokenomics of it, of course. But yeah, this thing will go live in Q1, and we are really looking forward to it. We're expecting a tremendous amount of participation.
Yeah, we'll be participating. I know you spoke to Egon off camera there. He has not one but two nodes set up in his house. That
Oh,
took
does he? Okay.
a little bit of convincing to get him to do that because he lives in quite a hot climate. But
Right.
the setup was very easy.
Yeah.
The sort of hardware that we needed. Really, anybody can get their hands on this hardware if they actually wanted to run a node. And
Yeah.
actually, I think very importantly, the barrier to entry from a kind of stake point of view, 30,000 Algorand, I think is very achievable. And of course, that's not the only option. If you want to stake, you're not going to miss out. I
Yeah.
think Algorand is
You
doing.
can join a ready pool if you want to do it as well. And then you can stake as little as one algo if you want. And you'll have a choice of ready pools to choose from. So it's pretty, we try to make it pretty as inclusive as we possibly can.
And I think that's what's at the heart of this industry, or certainly originally started at the heart of this industry. Satoshi created this protocol and said, look, you can mine and take part in this with your computer. Obviously, we know that the route, the space has gone now. And there's that kind of constant dilemma when you add things to these protocols that the hardware gets ever kind of more taxing. However, I think Algorand's done an amazing job, regardless of all the things that they're doing, with still keeping the barriers to entry very low. And that's one thing I absolutely love about you is you're very proud of what Algorand is doing, what it's achieved. It's got 100% uptime, which a lot of blockchains can't say. It's got this kind of forkless model. There's a million and one reasons. The scalability issue. I love the phrase that you brought up there, that success isn't going to be your downfall. I think Ethereum and a lot of other chains out there, not to take anything away from Ethereum, really suffered from success. Too many people using the chain. It's too expensive. I know when I did my books a few years ago and I had sort of given my account and everything, and she was kind of saying, hang on, you paid this to send this or to unstake this?
Yeah, it'd be a little
Even she was a
embarrassing.
little bit mind boggled, which was interesting.
Right. No, I would just say, one promise we can make is you'll never need enterprise grade hardware to help run this network. Never. That will never happen. So we will always stay at the individual level. Nice laptop. That'll be enough.
Yeah, no, and I think again that's so true to the sort of ethos this space came out of. Before I sort of dive into some real world applications, Algorand is doing big things across the board. I want to talk a little bit about governance, if we can, because I've taken part in governance. I know governance was incentivized. What's happening with governance moving forwards with all these changes? Is there changes to governance coming? What's the sort of state of play with governance on Algorand at the moment?
Yeah. So as you know, we have now we had a very I would say ineffective grant program, and now the governors do make all of the decisions about the funding that comes out of the foundation. What they have been lacking there is a good tool to do that, to be able to review proposals, to be able to vote on those proposals. You as a governor, I'm sure if you're an ex-gov, you know that. And so we have been building with the community and getting input from them, of course, a tool to be an ex-gov and to be able to participate as an ex-gov. And so that we're reaching a very important milestone with that tool now. But to have a proper front end and a nice user experience, we're still looking at Q2 for that. So that's really an ongoing project. So that's kind of the front end of the thing. And then the second piece is how do you qualify to be an ex-gov now? And so we are still thinking this through with the community. But right now, it will be sufficient that you are securing the network by staking algos. And so the question now for the community are there other ways that you might qualify in addition to that? So the qualification criteria is not quite nailed down, I would say. But yeah, we hope to sort of seamlessly roll over the idea that as a governor, now you will be staking algos, and so that will qualify you. And as an ex-gov, you're going to get a nice shiny tool, because it's been kind of a miserable experience to participate in these and reading these. And then the third thing is I think we need a committee of community members, not of anybody from the Algorand Foundation, but I think we do need an ex-govs committee and we're talking to the community about this now, is my understanding, that will not select proposals, but that will veto proposals that are just nonsense, so that the ex-govs can have a short list of proposals that all kind of meet minimum criteria and make sense, and then they can vote on those. So I think that's going to be a really important additional evolution. And where we need to get to eventually is that it is the community that is driving actually protocol upgrades. And I would say that we're still far away from that. As you know, the foundation does not have any say or control over protocol upgrades. But eventually, we would like to move to a world that is a bit more Ethereum-like in that regard, where the roadmap for the protocol itself is a bit more community-driven, and also the contributions to the core protocol come increasingly from the community. But that's on the horizon, we hope.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so much going on with Algo. We could talk about Algo Toolkit. There's a lot I want to get into, and we'll sort of deliberately leave some things out, so that we can sort of cover some core issues that people have sort of asked me around in regards to Algorand, what it's doing, et cetera, et cetera. But there's so much going on, guys. I do absolutely encourage anybody listening to get over to the Algo website, get over to the Algo Foundation website. Go and give Staci a follow. We'll leave links to everything in the description. Some of the other players involved in the Algorand space. There's just
And
so
for running a node, we have good developer docs. I don't know that we've dropped them yet, but in the next week or so, we're going to develop a very nice step by step. You should be able to easily set up a node. I mean, like really your own, not with anybody else help. Not a sub host under anybody else, but running your own node. So we're going to try to make that as easy as possible. And of course, we'll get feedback about things that aren't clear, and then we'll upgrade that documentation.
I'm very excited to see. I mean, I think there's going to be huge participation in this. I know, not just myself that set up a node, a number of people. We're talking, I need more hands to count them all, that are actually also getting involved. Very excited about it. Governance is always an interesting area for me to talk on, because it's such a complex thing to try and do. And there's so many theories about how it should be done, how it shouldn't be done. What should there be an incentive? Should there shouldn't? So it's a really complex task you guys are under sort of taking. So I really am excited to see how it all progresses and follow the journey for Algorand. Let's talk about some.
Yeah, I mean, so are we. Like, if we want to upgrade the software on the protocol now, it's pretty easy to do. The foundation has a lot of algos staked, and so the foundation, they say, okay, this software upgrade's coming. We upgrade our software, and like we're almost there. And then very competent large holders of algos are also participating. So it's like they can make 10 phone calls or 20 phone calls, and it's kind of done. And so when we enter this world now, which is coming very quickly, of decentralization, then everything is going to need to be, we're still going to need that 90% voting to do any kind of software upgrade. And I'm talking about the core protocol here, not what the foundation's up to. So decentralization, we hope that the foundation algos become much, much less of the total stake, right? So we're targeting a very low, manageable, but low number of foundation algos to be part of the total staked algos. So in that world, it's a little scary, because then, there's a lot more cats to wrangle, and it's a lot harder to do if you do need to do something like a software upgrade, right? So, but it will be a very adult problem to have, because then we'll be a very decentralized chain, truly. So, yeah, I'm so excited about 2025. I can't even tell you. It's going to be really great.
Yeah, I'm over the moon about sort of everything that's going on with Algo as a holder, as a fan, I guess, of the chain. It's very, I mean, governance again is always such a complex topic, and I'm looking forward to taking part. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. You mentioned something there. Maybe this is something you can talk on. Maybe it's something you can't. But in regards to the foundation's Algorand holdings, are there any plans with that moving forwards? Is that something you can talk on? Is that something we shouldn't sort of venture into? Um, are there any plans moving forwards with that?
Well, I mean, the biggest plan is that we are committing now a lot of algos to for the next 2 years to reward consensus. So that took a big chunk out of the
Believe it.
overall foundation, treasury, as you can imagine. And I think when we get the governance, I mean, the reward, the grants program in a good state, then we expect to see a bit more money going to that, of course, right? Because we and the community is in agreement with this, that we want to make small mistakes first. So we're not giving out a lot of money, or they aren't giving a lot of money in its current manifestation. But if that starts working really well, then I'm expecting them to vote in larger, I should say not them, but you, since you're part of this, more money for grants and getting a bit more sophisticated around that. Otherwise, it's a bit BAU, I would say. We we make sure that our investments have both a monetary value to them, but also an impact value to them. That's hard to get always exactly right, but we are out of the bear market now. So there's a lot less, just keeping people alive and, giving money to just make sure that, people can survive the bear market. That's part of our job in a way, but it's also not a great use of funds. Our goal is that everybody that's building on Algorand, they can stand on their own 2 feet because they have a good business model, they have product market fit, they have a good management team, they have a good tech team, they can survive on their own. That's the idea of this, right? And so, but when you only have one of something, and so is this ecosystem gets bigger and bigger, and we have more redundancies of kind of the core, primitives and core products and core companies. This is the direction that we're all supposed to be traveling in, right? So it gets, in a way, a bit easier to be the foundation, right?
Yeah, and I think that's going to bring us perfectly onto where I want to take this. I'm really glad you mentioned some of that, because when you think about, for example, technologies that have came before us, like the internet, what we're currently communicating on, um, people saw the technology and said, okay, I can build this use case that's going to serve the masses upon it. I think there's a real similarity, and I think there obviously is a similarity between a technology like the internet and people saying, okay, we want to build upon that and we want to leverage the internet to make our business successful, with people leveraging distributed ledger technology, people leveraging Algorand specifically to help sort of enhance their business, come up with a product market fit. And it's very interesting that the prospect for Algorand is it's very fit to do whatever somebody might need to do. That's becoming even more the case with the ALGO toolkit and everything else. It's only going
Yeah.
to take one killer application to really just ignite the entire industry. I mean, somebody might come up with the next YouTube, Facebook, I dare say JP Morgan, or something along those lines on Algorand. I don't know if you have anything to sort of say on that and how you see Algorand more broadly as a platform that people can leverage in the real world.
Yeah, and you really teed me up perfectly by first talking about the internet. So and I've read a couple of books on this, so I do want to give some credit to these. I read Walter Isaacson's The Innovators, and I read Chris Dixon's Read, Write, Own, and they are both very good histories of the internet forward. And the point of the example of the internet, of the web, of web browser technology, of email technology, is this is permissionless. It's anybody can build anything on it. And this is why you have so many different kinds of email clients, why you have so many different kinds of web browsers, why you have different, it's an open architecture. And it was a very, it was a moment in time that maybe got a little bit lucky in certain ways that we ended up like this. And then these big companies started building on that open architecture, and they made it very easy to use. And then they locked you in. So, the Facebook and the TikTok and the Instagram and the Twitter came along, and they said, okay, once you're, when you're in Instagram, you can't take a video outside of Instagram without an Instagram wrapper on it. If you want to read, you buy a book on your Kindle, but you can't read it except on your Kindle. You can't sell that book to somebody else, right? You don't own any of these things. You're at the mercy of the algorithms. You don't know how those algorithms work. And this like Web 2, it's very different from that. It's not an open architecture at all. And Chris Dixon had one line in this book that really struck with me. He said, no VC will fund a company that is building a product that lives on Facebook or Twitter anymore. Nobody will do that, because those platforms will take the all of the economies from that, and they will either copy the product and cut you out, or make sure that they can capture all of your profit. Whereas and he's of course a Web3 VC, right? He's A16Z. So, but whereas even in the third year of our bear market, we were still seeing funding in this space, because that promise of open architecture. Now, mind you, those Web 2 companies, they also promised open architecture in the beginning, but they reneged on that promise because management companies decided that no, it would be a bit better if we could build all this and take all this ourselves. But the thing about Web 3 is that that promise is believable because of the architecture of the blockchain, because of what I said before. 90% of the thousands of nodes that will be running Algorand, they're all going to have to agree to do something nefarious. And that's just not going to happen. And so when we say this is an open architecture for you to build on and it's performant, you can invest that money and that time and that human capital that you have, knowing that that rug is not going to be pulled out from underneath you once you're successful, right? And so this is, to me, one of the core things that I believe about Web3, and I believe makes me excited about Algorand, is this very fact that anybody can build there. And if we have that killer app that you talk about, that company, even though I might want to say, oh, I could just like take more of the take rate from that company, I'm not able to do that. I mean, I personally don't want to do that, but I couldn't even if I did want to. And so, yeah, come and build.
Yeah, and I think it's going to happen. Honestly, it excites me. I mean, I talked to some projects out there, and I just think, wow, like this if this takes off, all this needs is a spark to really ignite. Um, and I see so many of them on Algorand, and that's really where I want to go. Let's talk a little bit about Algorand's ecosystem. We know that distributed ledger technology is very much changing the world in many ways. You gave some brilliant sort of parallels there with what happened with the internet and how actually this technology can kind of combat that. We sort of take away a little bit of the techno feudalism from the Web 2 space. What are some of the applications you're seeing built on Algorand right now that you go, wow, this is a big deal?
What's interesting? I want to talk a little bit about things that are a big deal in maybe more in smaller areas, right? Because so if you look at, for example, World Chess. So we now have a partnership with World Chess, and World Chess, you can put your rankings will be recorded in real time on chain. Okay. So you might, and FIDE is the ranking body for World Chess. Okay, now you might think, if I told my cousin that, would she be like, okay, that's really important or not? But it turns out, the more I learned about this, it turns out that there's a lot of shenanigans that go on with chess rankings, actually. And, as it turns out, there's like 800,000 users of World Chess. They play 20,000 games a day. So if you are an avid chess player, you care very much that your ranking is real and can't be tampered with. And that can only happen on a blockchain. Now, there's all kinds of other things about fan engagement and that kind of thing. But going back to the core principle of the blockchain, and Algorand's very proud to partner with World Chess, it's this idea that when the information is there, it has integrity. It has not been doctored. It can't be messed with, right? And so as a chess player, you're going to find that very important. Our mission statement actually is that, we power a world where information has integrity and innovative ideas can scale. That's what we're about at Algorand and Algorand broadly and at the foundation. Another example, I think of these as like big examples in this one, mercifully, I think small area, but you can, if you are a drug researcher, get the fame and glory and money from a successful drug launch, even if your drug is not successful, by mucking about with the MRI images that come from your drug efficacy. And in particular, this is a kind of an analogy, but if you take pictures of a tumor, a patient with a tumor, and over time that tumor is getting bigger after they take your drug, well, a very nice thing for you to be able to do would be to just switch the ordering of those images and show the tumor getting smaller, and submit that to large scale trials. And look, this tumor gets, but you're faking the data. And so a company building on Algorand called LabTrace, they partner with Siemens, and that timestamp of that MRI comes right out of the machine instantaneously, not even a nanosecond to be able to mess with that, instantaneously. And again, I hope this is a use case that is very small, actually, because I hope there's a very small number of medical researchers that are actually doctoring their MRI images. But this is where information integrity is so vitally important, that this is about people's health and cancer patients and their potentially their survival. And they've now, this company LabTrace, they've just done a partnership with the Gates Foundation, and they've got a couple of interesting things going on there with some portable MRI machines, where you can imagine the MRI machine is portable. It might be even easier to doctor these things. So they're really so these kinds of things I'm pretty excited about as well. If you're a big chemical company like Repsol or Sabic, these guys have partnered with Finboot because they have extremely stringent environmental standards that they have to meet. And proving that is hard and also time consuming. But they've partnered with Finboot. Finboot, of course, built on Algorand, using Algorand. And I think also that they moved from Ethereum because of cost. Actually, I think that's also true. But this idea that you can credibly claim, and this is why, you can credibly claim that the origin of where you say things got from, what things you say you have, is credible to everybody. And this is why it's funny, because people don't really ask me this question anymore. But when I started here, this question came up a lot. Like, why not a private blockchain? Wouldn't that be much more efficient? Wouldn't that be better? It's faster. Da, da, da. But that credibility can only come from a public blockchain. And so this idea that Finboot or Repsol or Sabic can say, even if I wanted to alter that information, I can't do it because it's on Algorand. I can't do it. I can't. And so it's like the game of chicken, where you're kind of tying your hands to the steering wheel and saying you're taking away agency to prove the credibility of your claims. These are examples that I think are really super interesting. And I bring these up also because I do have my go-to examples that I talk to on podcasts. I'm trying to expand my repertoire away from those, but but I have others that I can also talk about.
No, they're brilliant, and I think really what all of those do. I love the fact that you brought up public versus private. You can't mess with a public blockchain unless you have all the
Oh,
nodes,
no,
which will
no.
just simply be impossible.
It's
Hopefully,
impossible.
yeah. So you can't actually mess with the kind of verifiability that blockchains give you. And actually, what's more important in life than truth and provenance, and being able to actually trust something? This word
Yeah.
trust, we kind of throw it around in the crypto space, but I don't think many people really stop to think about the actual weight behind that. Without trust, there's no society. Without trust, there's no relationships. Without trust, there's no anything. And those examples are very clear evidence of use cases that are leveraging Algorand to provide exactly that: trust,
Right.
reliability, etc.,
Right.
etc.
But it's a weird kind of trust. It's not come on, you can trust me. I'm a good guy. Like, I've never done anything to you in the past. You can kind of, blah, 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 blah. It's not that kind of trust. It's the trust me because you don't have to trust me. Because even if you don't trust me personally, I can't mess with this. And so therefore it's trustable in a way. The blockchain is not truth in that it has the same kind of garbage in and garbage out problem that any database will have. But once it's in, it can be information can be updated, of course, but information cannot be altered. And if you update the information, everybody, of course, can see the trail of those updates. So it's very transparent and it's very clear. And I think, on Algorand, it's something like 10 to the negative 16 or 10 to the negative 18, chance that all of these thousands of nodes all over the place can get together and just decide to change the order of transactions on the ledger. So, I mean, this is an extremely small number. So
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think one of the best things I ever heard about I can't remember who said it. I'm sure someone will let me know. One of the best things I ever heard about actually the power of this technology was, could you imagine if we had a distributed ledger that was kind of immutable from the start of humankind? We'd live in a completely different world,
Very different world.
because
Very different
history
world.
couldn't have been tinkered with. It couldn't have been changed. We'd probably be further ahead in many fields. Of course, this is
Right.
speculation. It's not happened, but you can see that kind of progression. If you have a source of truth, if you have something people can't tamper with, they can't mess with, it's
Yeah.
distributed. You could imagine a
Right.
world that we could be some sort of a utopia we're living in. Although I'm not
Yeah.
convinced Nirvana is for this world. Um,
But a lot of us are old enough to remember people building things on Facebook and people building products on Twitter, and that it is the success of those products that made those products go away. And it's that capturing of value that the blockchain cannot do. That's why your initial metaphor, your initial analogy back to the internet itself is so apt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the breadth of things that Algorand's doing, the space more broadly is doing, is just it truly is unbelievable. Very much like yourself, transitioning from a very kind of traditional industries to the crypto space. It's kind of a little bit rogue still. I think those barriers are being broken down more and more so. Certainly with a lot
Yeah.
of the things going on with the United States. Just a quick segue. What are your thoughts on everything
It's a
taking?
one-way street, I will say, though, from finance to crypto. It's a one-way street. You just
Yeah.
you travel down it, and you travel down it at whatever speed you travel, but you don't go back. Like, you don't go the other direction. Like, you just
Once you
yeah.
see it, yeah, no, absolutely. And
Yeah.
just as a quick segue, I want to get into some sort
Yeah.
of real world asset stuff and maybe stable coins and things like that, because I know Algorand's doing a lot in those departments. What do you think about everything going on in the US? Big
I
question.
think it's very positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is obviously very positive, I think, for the industry. I mean, we are very, nothing has happened yet. President Trump hasn't even taken office yet, but the signs are very positive. And I think there is many reasons to be hopeful. That the SEC under Atkins will have a more of a, look, nobody, no, the people in crypto are the ones that were the most burned from Three Arrows Capital and Do Kwon and FTX. So these early days of no regulation and we're a completely parallel financial sector and da da da. I mean, there are people that are still hold those beliefs, but most of the sector now wants sensible regulation, right? So that's point one. So the sector has kind of come along and is now clamoring for good regulation. Second, we have some, reasonable people at the SEC that are not scared to, and I think also in Senate banking as well. We'll see, who that is, but the Senate and the House, and we'll get some legislation passed, even perhaps, some stablecoin legislation, which would be really important for the industry. So we will have, so it's this like trifecta. One, the industry is ready. Two, we have the administration that is open to the idea of digital assets. And President Trump has said a number of times that he wants to be the world leader in digital assets. And number three, um, thank is probably is too strong of a word, definitely, but we have a little bit the Democrats to thank for this in that we didn't do anything. And so now other countries are, 2, 3, 4 years ahead of us. So we have the luxury of being able to look around and pick some of the best things that other jurisdictions have tried to do. And so I think we're in a very enviable position right now to really have just a terrific year where companies from all over the world can come to the United States, play on a playing field that is level or perhaps even better than in other jurisdictions, and be monitored by the best regulators in the world. And so I'm very bullish about the environment for crypto going forward for sure. And when I say bullish, I mean the use cases that can be rolled out as well as market caps of coins. That's not so much what I mean. I just mean the strength and the growth of the industry in the next 4 years. I think it's going to be, and then I think if that can happen, then it will be cemented enough that it can withstand some of the political back and forth going forward. And I also think that the Democrats will see, I hope anyway, maybe I don't know if I think, but I hope that they will see that it's not quite the boogeyman that they feared, and that both parties will begin to see this a bit more sensibly.
Yeah, I'm so excited as well. I share those thoughts with you. I mean, it's still kind of like a pipe dream, for me that this is actually happening, that we're here. I mean, I always knew this
Yeah,
technology was going to sort of take hold in the manners that we're seeing today, and we haven't even really seen it yet. When you think about the trajectory we're on and where we are, we're really at the first innings. And I know, we're talking years, from 2008 till now, but really things haven't been enabled to get to where they need to be. And with regulations, one thing that I'm very excited about is to see people coming out of the woodworks. It's not just me and you that have the foresight into how powerful this technology is. I'm sure it's most big corporations, institutions, just like with the internet, you do or die, you know? Um,
yeah,
and I think that's very, very exciting. So even though I'm not in America, I wish the UK would maybe adopt a bit of a similar stance, but we'll see what happens there.
yeah.
Politics is something.
You guys led on open banking, though. That was a very big contribution. So the world has you to thank for that good model.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, the UK's given some amazing things to the world. It's also given some not so great things, but that's for an entirely different uh, video. I think a good place for us to come on to is there's kind of a lot of really hot topics at the moment when it comes to crypto. One, I think, on the back end of the likes of what Larry Fink had to say in regards to tokenization and real world assets. And that's largely been echoed by a lot of people out there. It seems very evident that things are going to be tokenized and put on chain. It makes markets more efficient. You can definitely talk about this more than I can. Real world assets and Algorand. What are we seeing there? Has Algorand got a play for real world assets? What's kind of the state of play as it relates to real world assets, this massive sector and Algorand?
So there are two ways I think of thinking about real world assets. One is that you break them up into little pieces, and one that you don't necessarily have to break them up into little pieces. And what I think is interesting about the break them up into little pieces is the tokenizing of things like money market funds and bond funds and the like. And so we worked with Aberdeen and have tokenized a money market fund on Aberdeen just recently. That was a partnership with Archex, which is the tokenization platform, and Quantos, which has a euro dollar on a euro digital euro on Algorand. Digital euro is not a stable coin; it's a digital euro, so it's always one to one backed by the euro. It's digital money, the way that you understand it. And that when I think about that, I think of kind of futuristically about just holding a little, and that those are for accredited for white listed users. You have to, not anybody can just do it. So you have to be whitelisted, but you could, if you have a little tiny piece of that money market fund, you could do things like buy a cup of coffee with it. And what I think is interesting about that is this notion that your money is always earning yield for you, and it's earning yield to you for you up until the minute that you turn it over to your barista, at which point it starts earning money for the barista. Like, this is unimaginable on in traditional finance, right? So this is the kind of thing that I think is pretty interesting in this kind of fractionalization. Another real world asset tokenization is in prop tech. So if you are, and this is interesting to me because when I think of financial inclusion, I don't just think of poor people having access to bank accounts. That's mostly what people mean, but I also mean middle class investors having access to investment opportunities that are typically reserved for accredited investors or the rich. And rental income is one of those things, right? So I don't mean the in law suite over your garage. I mean owning an apartment building with multiple apartments in it, or owning an Airbnb somewhere, or and being able to get that unearned income stream. And this is a very nice investment opportunity, as people have understood for decades and decades and decades. Problem is, very hard to do if you don't have a lot of money up front to buy the apartment building. So another company on Algorand called Lofty AI, they have created a marketplace where for as little as $50, you can buy a portion of that apartment building if you want. And you will have the rental income that accrues to you that corresponds to the percentage of the total investment that you've made. So you have a little piece of that income stream if you want. And if you, of course, the more you invest in it, the more share of that income stream you'll get is, I think, a really important way to also think about financial inclusion for households that are not accredited investors. A third way to do it, so that's those both, though, those kind of fractionalize, use tokenization to fractionalize big lumpy investments. And of course, there's other things. You can do this with paintings, you can do this with anything that's lumpy, you can make it into little bits. And a non-lumpy example, though, is similar in that there's another aspect of tokenization, which is creating markets where markets don't actually exist. And I think this stuff is also very interesting. So there are carbon trading markets, for example, that exist. But Eureka, which is a small Mongolian carbon trading company, they've created carbon markets at the household level. So if you are a Mongolian household, and they have this not just in Mongolia, even as far as Brazil, they're doing work. But if you put a solar panel on your house in Mongolia, it's very easy to see how much environmental protection you're generating because they know how much coal a coal heating unit generates in soot and carbon and all of that. And so they can very easily monetize for you how much coal and soot you're not putting into the environment by this. And then on individual markets, carbon trading markets, carbon trading markets are for big players, right? But they're coming at the household level and making carbon trading markets for households. So I think that is a really interesting use of tokenization as well. And then last, there is or last in my list, so I stopped talking, is an airline called TravelX that is tokenizing airline tickets. It's another example of creating a market that didn't exist before in the secondary sales of airline tickets. So you buy an airline ticket to someplace you decide you don't want to go there. You are kind of, excuse my language, you're kind of screwed. The airline tells you, no, you can do it, but you can only do it within 1 year and you got to make the exact same thing. And or, there's a penalty of $75 if and it's just like such a nightmare. But they have partnered now with a couple of airlines. And I think there's now signing their fourth airline where you can put your ticket up for sale on a market and be able to sell to somebody else that ticket. Now, of course, this being the blockchain, you can attach little things to it. So if you are a good traveler and you have a lot of lounge pass and stuff, you can kind of attach your lounge pass to your ticket because it goes with your ticket, and then that next person can also have your lounge pass or whatever it is. And so these are the two, just to wrap it up a little bit, these are the two things that I think are in a taxonomy pretty interesting. One is this idea that you can take lumpy things and tokenize them and make them smaller, and that creates markets. And then the other way that you can use tokenization to create markets that didn't exist at all. And I think this is just another way that the blockchain technology itself is very good, and Algorand specifically is very performant in this area.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's
yeah,
yes.
the underlying tech that this is built
Sorry.
on has to be sort of usable. And that's one thing that stands
Yeah.
out from the start with Algorand. But if people are stumbling upon Algorand for the first time today, I really hope this is one of the first videos they watch, because what they're going to find is all of the areas in which Algorand is having a unbelievable impact on. So we've spoken about things like chess. Just more recently, we spoke about money market funds. Actually, I interviewed Graham, the CEO of Archax, and he said he was very excited about the exact same thing that you're excited about, which is the kind of tokenization of money market
Yeah.
funds and using them as payments. I mean,
Yeah.
that is,
So cool.
it's just mind blowing. And actually, I think, and I truly do believe this, that distributed ledgers are going to do amazing things for the traditional financial system. I know it's kind of against the ethos, perhaps, of what this industry spawned out of. We're supposed to be against them. But actually, I don't think that's the case. I think this technology will impact that sector perhaps more so than any other. It will revolutionize it, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. I mean, you asked me about real world assets, but I think DeFi has
Of
almost as
course.
big an impact. And you probably talk about DeFi all the time on this thing, but it is amazing to me that retail financial customers cannot borrow against their investments even if they're over collateralized in traditional finance. Like, why can't you do that? It's over collateralized. And so the idea that DeFi lets you, if you have wealth in Bitcoin or wealth in crypto of some kind that you can, instead of having to sell those assets that you don't want to sell, but you can borrow against them, not looking for credit, not looking for, a loan to value ratio of anything. It's like over collateralized, and that you can borrow against that and use it to renovate your house, or buy the car that you want, and you feel confident about being able to make those payments and that your collateral is not going to get called. Then this opens up just a whole world for retail customers that it's frankly always been a surprise to me that traditional finance has not gotten its act together to offer this to their clients.
Maybe they've just been looking for a sort of technology that may enable them to do so, and I think we've stumbled upon it.
Right,
Um,
right, right. Yeah.
Honestly, again, back to my statement there. If people are finding Algorand for the first time today, this is. I hope they stumble upon this video, because we've discussed
Me too.
multiple areas, from sort of big, bulky financial things that are trillions and trillions of dollars in terms of value that's going to be coming on chain. That doesn't mean any market cap, or we're not sort of speculating on tokens individually. Just the volume, the size, really, to weigh up the magnitude of what's going to be coming on chain. Spoken about smaller things, airline tickets. I mean, it's just a very useful thing to have, that if you buy an airline ticket, you can't make it, you can now sell that on. It doesn't just stop there. Concert tickets, you're going to be able to do the same thing with. Whatever ticket bust, you can just see the transformations that Algorand is bringing to the table. DeFi, we could have gone further on DeFi and say, okay, well, now we can actually build sort of credibility scores on blockchains, because they've got a very unique feature that they can do that. And then you can kind of have instead of them needing to trust traditional stuff that can be, you can now sort of almost be your own bank in terms of how you get money, how you lend money. There's so many areas that this technology is changing.
You can create a reputation for yourself, absolutely. And the
Absolutely.
reason that you can create a reputation for yourself is that you cannot alter the information that you generate about yourself. And so knowing that, people believe the reputation that you put forward for yourself on blockchain.
Back to our original talking
Back to
points.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. We've come full circle, Rupert.
absolutely. So when you look at this as a whole, and you look at all of these, and we've spoken about a minuscule part of a treasure chest of use cases that Algorand is enabling and facilitating. And that's exciting. This is one of those videos
Getting
that
hard to keep track of for me, actually.
I believe
It's
it.
starting to get hard to keep track of. Yeah.
Rather you than me in this situation. But go and check out Algorand, guys. I'm absolutely encouraging everyone to go and check out what's actually going on here. It only takes 1, 2, 3, 4, let alone hundreds of these things to really take hold. And Algorand just becomes this unstoppable powerhouse, not to mention all of the things fundamentally going on in regards to the protocol, et cetera, et cetera. I think I've got multiple questions for you, Staci. We could honestly talk
Lay it on me. Lay it on me.
all day long. But reflecting, when you're the CEO of the Algorand Foundation, I really want to know what you want to leave in regards to your impact. What's your goal here as the CEO of the Algorand Foundation? What do you want your legacy to be?
I want Algorand to be named. I want it to be the one that you talk about, the one that is named, the one that is like where it's happening. I am tired of, I have deep respect for other L1 blockchains, of course, but I am just tired of the naming of the 3 or 4 blockchains and not having Algorand in that list. And when Algorand's in that list, then I'll be happy. And it will be in that list because of all of the things that not that I've done so much, but all the things that this community has done. There are these waves coming forward that I think we'll be able to capture. The AI is one, right? Where I think we're very well positioned. Post quantum, I think we're very well positioned. We've made some good initial steps that I think our job is to position ourselves for the future and to get in the zeitgeist and to support and the developers that are building on Algorand, make sure that they have the best community experience possible, make sure they have the best developer experience possible, and just I want to be in that top tier of always talked about, always referred to, and always thought about blockchains.
And I don't think there's any reason why Algorand can't do that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to leave links to all things Algorand in the description, where you can go and check out more things, some of the GitHub, some of the development docs. Some of the mediums, obviously the Algorand's official websites, obviously Staci's Twitter. Do go and give Staci a follow. Staci, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really do hope people stumble upon this video if it's their first time getting into Algorand, and I honestly would love to have you back on the show again. Thank you very much.
And Rupert, thank you so much for just what you do for the ecosystem more generally, that you bring a very seasoned and articulate and reasoned approach to this. And I think you're doing a service to all of us to make the crypto ecosystem more broadly known out there. And so we'd all owe you a debt of gratitude for that.